I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
Hello.
You were actually ready this time.
I was ready. You
The
gave me
first.
plenty of warning, though. See, communication.
I normally give you warning. You're just doing something, so.
So we were going to talk about something, and even up until you had the countdown to start this podcast, I was like, yep, that's what we're talking about. And as you were doing the introduction, my mind went back to last night, and so we're going to talk about that instead.
Oh, geez. Okay. What about it?
Well, there needs to be a little backstory. So I guess we'll start at, this was round 2 of attempting to record.
Mm-hmm.
We attempted to record last night, and we ended up taking things a different direction. We started recording, we got about 10 seconds in, and I was like, nope, stop. We have had a lot this last week. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about it is because it's actually going to segue right into what we're actually going to talk about. So we can have a part 2 or whatever you want to call it, but they're going to have to listen to this one, and it's going to poop right into the next one.
Okay.
So they'll have to listen to that one too. So essentially, it's been a lot. I mean, to put it the easy way, right? We have a lot of major transitions happening in our lives right now. Basically, if you think about big topics outside of relationships, so, we're checking all the boxes for big transitions. We're trying to, decide on staying in our house or moving, right? We've got a few months here to make that decision. I'm transitioning in some of the projects and stuff that I'm working on. You've kind of recently transitioned and taken on full-time in your new role that you're currently doing, and trying to figure out how that fits with everything else that we're doing, as far as, the coaching consulting that I do, as far as, everything we do with the Covenant Chronicles, and also trying to basically generate this year. We're about a month and a half into us creating something that we hope will be massively impactful. We even had conversation today as far as a new way that we may be able to help people and create massive value for people, just to, impact relationships. And while all of this is going on, we had 2 kid medical emergencies. One of our kids ended up in the hospital and having to have emergency surgery. And, I think we talked about that a little bit on the last podcast, and then ended up having to go back to the hospital because they thought there was possible complications.
Yeah.
In the middle of mixing all that around, we had another kid slam their finger good enough in the car door that the car door latched shut. And so, had to go, of course, get x-rays and all the fun stuff, and, and go back because they thought they missed something, because, a couple weeks later, the stuff is still messed up and had a hard time moving it. And it turned out, it was just soft tissue damage, which is healing on its own and not really much they can do. But, there's this stuff going on. We had holidays, my dad's birthday right in the middle of this, Valentine's Day right in the middle of this. We've had some stuff pretty substantial, things where jobs that were completed that had already been paid out, issues with credit card processors, and, having to battle through that, right? having an insurance issue recently, having issues like if you name an issue, right? And it seems to be something that we've dealt with all in like this last week, if you will, right?
Yeah, my
Oh,
best friend from high school unexpectedly passed away,
right.
and her and her husband were actually listeners of the podcast. So I just throw that out there because if you're a believer, you know, pray for them during this time and pray for her husband and their two kids and
Right.
her whole family. Um,
Right. And that's
so
the
that's on
yeah.
top of everything else.
Yeah, and that's, another example of like stuff that, like right in the middle of like you were I don't even think 48 hours after, one of the kids going back to the hospital,
Yeah.
and it's you were still trying to deal with that and come out the other side of that, and like, within 48 hours then your best friend, like you said, passed. And so it's been a week. And we have had a roller coaster because it's been, spike connection, us building intimacy and connection. Life comes crashing down. We start to build, life comes crashing down. And it's just been this, whatever, because we had the couple days last week, mostly dealing with all the kids stuff and this and that. And it was like just these crazy couple days. And we go right from that into, okay, it's Valentine's Day. And, my dad's birthday, and the kids, ended up staying with dad for his birthday. And it was like, oh, okay, well, we can have a little time for Valentine's Day. And, we went and ended up, doing breakfast and stuff together. And we had, some intimate time. And, then we go on a double date with friends of ours. And, then we get the kids and we get them back. And we're kind of on this like, okay, hey, it was a crazy few days, but we're getting back some of our connection, and we're rebuilding it. And that becomes our focus. And, then we go into like a Sunday, right? And it's okay, well, now things are, seemingly kind of mellowing out, right? And then that night starts to, back
Yeah.
back to a tumble, right? And so we go into this where it's been like about a day and a half of, okay, we can take a breather, we can build connection, come together, and then 2 to 3 days of just getting hit, right?
Yeah.
And it just had built up and built up and built up. And it came to this point where last night, you were definitely off. I was off, and I just kept asking you, hey, are you good? Like, are you all right? What's up? And I kept getting the like nothing, right?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. And here's the thing. Most guys will do one of two things. One, get pissed off. Two, shrug it off. Okay? Here's the thing for the men. If she says I'm fine, she is never fine.
I'm fine and it's fine.
Yes. Yes. If she says those things, she's
Not fine.
not fine. And it is not fine. Do not take the trap or the bait. Okay, you're gonna be like on the like the cartoons when they set up the little trap, and it's got like the cheese, and then it's got the rope or whatever they put in the middle, and then there's a rope and some type of sling. Right, that's what you're stepping in. Okay, so and then I did have a moment of frustration, because that wasn't, it wasn't, oh, it's fine, and then I get fresh, let's basically, you said it's fine, I'm fine, and then we start the podcast, and that's where it was like you went right into starting it, and I'm like, nope, absolutely not, we're not doing that. And you're like, okay, right? And we had started recording, like we had started, I'm like, nope, like hit the pause button.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I guess we're going to have to re-record this. I'm like, yep. And I'm like, let's bring this back. Right. And so it did take a little bit of work. Right. I don't think either of us were 100% in the best place to have a conversation at that point. And like I said, I did have a moment of frustration when we started to work through this stuff. And it was what it came down to was it was a really hard time. We dealt with a lot of stuff, medical emergencies with kids, deaths of people close to us, um, financial hit, transitions, whatever, like you name it. Like we've dealt with it this week, right?
Yeah.
And it was a tough week. Or let me reframe that. It was harder than we wanted it to be,
Yes.
right? And so what it came down to is neither of us were in a good place, but it took one of us kind of hitting the pause button and saying, okay, I wanted to keep moving forward, right? And I felt like we had talked somewhat that morning about moving forward and some of the crappy mindset we had recently. And hey, let's keep things pushing, let's keep things moving forward. And then I felt here we're flipping right back, right? And so I got a little bit frustrated. And then I took a breath and I stopped and I said, okay. And at that point, I explained, hey, I got frustrated. Here's why. This is the reason that I was frustrated. It's not the proper way to handle this. I understand that. And then I repeated back what you had said earlier in the conversation. Said, so, and it's funny because you hear this, right? Like you hear crap and you hear these like communications, like coaching, I guess, tips, or you hear your favorite person that you follow and they're talking about mindset or communication, and they talk about repeating back what you'd heard, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds so silly. And when you first start doing this inside of your relationship, you feel awkward, you feel weird, you're like, this is dumb, right? You have all these thoughts, but at the end of the day, it's said because it's true, right? And so in this situation, I went and I repeated back what you had said. It wasn't even at this moment. It was like 5 minutes earlier, right?
Mhm.
And because I had got a little bit frustrated, it almost shut you down. But I acknowledged that. I realized that, came back and said, okay, let me hit the pause button on this, where we're going, explained why I was frustrated, admitted it was the wrong move, and then went back to, okay, so you are feeling this. You are feeling this.
Yeah.
You're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling disconnected. And you feel like I haven't been there for you the way you had hoped or the way you needed me to be, which left you feeling very lonely. Right. And you're like, yeah, exactly. Right. And then we were able to talk, and I came through and I said, okay, part of my frustration is I've done all these things, this and this and this and this and this, that I was trying to do to connect with you and let you know that I was here and I love you. But I realize the last 2 days here, or the last couple days, those things that I was doing weren't necessarily the things that you needed to feel loved and connected. So what could I have done differently in those moments? And you said, look, my head's not there right now. I'd love to give you an answer to that. Can we circle back to that? I don't know how to really explain it right now. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I held your hand. We had a moment. You were able to let out emotion. And it was like, the walls came down and you were able to breathe. It was like your tension, sank away, and everything, relaxed.
Mhm.
And then we went and had sex to fix it all. No, I'm just kidding.
I
We did
mean,
do
kind
that. It
of.
just it but it was that bringing the connection back, right? And what's funny is I think it's one of the better times we've had maybe in the last couple weeks, but I the point in all of this is really I wanted to talk about this to give an example and show, like I said, we've talked about it multiple times on the podcast. We didn't start the podcast to give you a hope and a dream, right? Our goal from the very beginning was to be very raw, very honest, and very truthful about what happens inside of the relationships and help people get from the places we've been previously in our life, previous relationships to the point now, right? Where we can acknowledge, like even today, we were acknowledging how strong our relationship is and how much we love it and enjoy it and just kind of complimenting each other and going back and forth, right? And but also with that is showing the rawness of like, hey, we do screw up,
Yeah.
but here's the difference, right? Because 99% of the time in that situation, right, where you're already pretty well shut down and I'm frustrated, right? Because we're human and those are things that happen.
Yeah.
And just due to this week, neither of us were really in the 100% best mental state to deal with things. And when it hit that point in the kind of the middle of our conversation yesterday, 99% of the time, it's gonna go where one of the parties starts trying to justify things, the other party gets defensive, and then it becomes a back and forth. And now you guys are arguing about stuff that really doesn't like you're arguing points that are I don't want to say irrelevant or not important because they're typically related to feelings, but usually you're arguing points that aren't the actual root cause of what's going on.
Yeah.
And also you're creating disconnection that doesn't need to be there because both of you are now in like this pissing match of like, no, you're wrong because my feelings are more important.
Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to show exactly how that occurrence or this situation happened so people can understand, right? So for the men out there, they can understand this is what it looks like. And it's not about being 100% perfect every time. It's about understanding and having the frame that even if you slip up, you can put yourself back where you need to be and be able to take care of and lead her and also show how this looks like from the woman's perspective of like you're human, you go through things too, and even if either of us don't handle the things right, how you come back around, right, and you communicate, right?
Hmm.
Because even when I ask you the question, how can I do this better, instead of just shutting down or being like, I don't want to talk about it. Because you see that a lot too, right? Where like if somebody doesn't have an answer, they just shut down or they get annoyed at, leave me alone, stop. I can't,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And you didn't. You just said, hey, look, I'm not all there right now to be able to, give you the answer. And I do want to answer, but I can't right now. Right.
Yeah.
And then I also didn't get mad at you in my man's fixer brain being like, well, how can I fix things if you don't get it, da, 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 right? Like, no, okay, I understand. And then held you and loved you, right? And we were able to move forward.
Well, I kind of sort of was talking about this with a friend today on a hike. Not really necessarily about like what happened, but we were kind of talking about how women in general tend to get um, overwhelmed with our emotions, and we tend to, go into like sensory overload from everything, and how, you know, both of us are working to like figure out the best way to handle that when that happens with us, right? But I think that that's something that happens with so many women, and to be honest, they just don't understand or realize what's happening. And I can look back now and see, like, that's what was happening with me, and I knew that I just had a lot of emotions and felt overwhelmed, but the thing is that, like, I'm usually pretty good at processing my emotions and, like, letting them out and that sort of thing, but I had held on to so many emotions from the last week that I wasn't actually, like, processing and letting go of,
Mhm.
and I've learned how to do that in the last couple years, but, because there was so much just, like, over and over and over and over again, I wasn't, like, processing it and letting it go like I normally do. So I had held on to a whole bunch of emotions that I needed to let go of, but I hadn't. And
Mhm.
so they built up to the point of yesterday where I did feel physically overwhelmed, like complete like sensory overload, because I had so many emotions that were going on and I hadn't like processed them. And we hadn't really been communicating super well. So like I told you some things, but hadn't told you all the things, and so there was just a lot, and I realized that because I was holding on to these feelings, then, like, previous patterns started to show up where, I'm just holding on to all of this, and I start getting anxious, and then I start getting in my head, and then because I'm in my head, I start being insecure about things, and then that leads down and just causes a whole bunch of other issues that aren't actually there, but because I wasn't actually releasing the emotions that I needed to release, all of these things started compounding. And so actually being able to like have a conversation with you and finally being able to release those emotions, like it took a little while. We had a conversation for a while before finally I was able to like actually process and release emotions. And it did get to the end where you were asking me questions, and I was like, my brain's just shut off right now, which I also think happens with a lot of women. And it's not, men don't understand that. It probably happens to men too, but for women, we get super emotional and like our brain just shuts off. And then like the thought process is really hard to do, which is kind of part of like fight or flight response, which, I mean, when your body is going through that much emotion is probably what's happening. But all that to say, like, we talk about, how we communicate and like better ways to do things and stuff. And we're still also learning a lot of these things and how to best communicate with each other. But we have moments that we don't do things as well as we would like to do them. And that was definitely one of those times, just, so many things happening at once and just not being able to like release and process things the way that they needed to be, kind of built up to something that really could have exploded and gone pretty badly, probably.
Mhm.
um, but, when we were having we had multiple conversations yesterday, and one of them, like I did tell you, like I'm feeling very defensive, and I had to stop myself from like continuing to talk about something because I could tell that my brain was going to trail down a way that it wasn't necessary, right?
Mhm.
Like, it would have just caused more problems, and there was no reason for it to go that direction. So, I stopped and was like, "I'm feeling defensive, and I don't want that." So, and then, when we went into our other conversation, um, as well, there was a moment that it was like, I'm not wanting to fight with you about this. I don't want this to turn into a giant argument. I'm just trying to explain things. So, I think we do a good job of, even, and not always, we do have times that things get past the point that they shouldn't, right? But we are getting much better at being able to communicate, like, this isn't going the way that that we want it to go.
Right.
Let's pause and reframe and try to get back on track.
Well, and I think that's part of why we've been so successful in our relationship and creating this position that we're in, right? Is because, when we talk about things, right? We talk about, people as human beings, we want finite lines, right? Meaning we want to know that this is okay, I'm trying to get from point A to point B,
Mhm.
as opposed to, well, I'm getting from point A to point B, so then I can go from B to C, from C to D, right? And we don't want that. We want to say, okay, I want to go from point A to point B.
Mhm.
And the reason why is because it's just we want to live in the known, right? We don't want to live in the unknown. And so when you see this, like for us, right, part of what I was saying with the us being so successful is we always move the line, right? Like we get there and okay, we move it again. And we get there and we move it again. And it's not a like unhealthy, never satisfied. It's we acknowledge, hey, we've gotten to here, but there's other things we can work on, right?
Yeah.
Or we can get even better at this. Well, man, we've gotten so good at this. Where can we fine tune it more, right? And it's like almost a curiosity of like, let's see how much better we can keep being, right? And in these, in our communication, in our conflict resolution, in our supporting each other, in, all these different areas of our relationship. And the big thing about that is that, like you said, when we say, man, sometimes things do get further than they should, right?
Mhm.
It's not the 99% of situations where things going further than they should are yelling, screaming, throwing clothes out the door, leaving, going on these long drives, these like really heightened animated places, right?
Yeah.
We've experienced that or been part of that in our past, right?
Yeah.
That is not where we're at. That's not what we do. And when we talk about, hey, things get further than they should, like we said, this was days of getting hammered by life and us navigating that. And then basically we have a day of us coming back together. And by, hey, it went farther than it should, you know, I probably should have asked you in the morning some of the things I asked you last night, right? You probably should have released some of those emotions that you were struggling to release earlier in the day instead of getting, all the way to night. In our conversation, like you know, I could have said a couple of things a little bit differently that would have expedited where we ended up. There
Yeah.
was things that you could have done differently. And that's, it's this increasing place of us trying to do better, right?
Mhm.
And it's so funny that we continue to hold ourselves to such a high esteem, or to a high standard rather, and as we achieve this, we continue to say, okay, let's go to the next step. Let's go to the next step. And we keep pushing ourselves so that it becomes this thing of, we do continue to get better. And, when we talk about these things, and we talk, you know, about where we're at and the things we've done or been through, and, maybe even some of the challenges we still face, it is to show that progression of, like, when we tell people, hey, this was years of work, and you can do this, and you can achieve these things that we talk about because we've done it.
Mhm.
But also, it's these steps, right? And every time, if you're shown, like we said, right, we talked about it yesterday, oh man, this isn't exactly where, 100% the way that we think we could have handled this, but it exposed, hey, we dug up some stuff, and there's some areas over here that we need to pour some fertilizer on, right? And water the grass in this area of our yard.
Mhm.
Cool. So now we know about it. Now we can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
And it's this mindset of, like, you're always going to have stuff that you can work through. You're always going to have stuff that you can work on. You're always going to have ways that you can improve. However, if you take any sort of where you didn't handle things perfectly as a learning opportunity, and be excited that you were given an opportunity to expose something that you can water and you can grow your grass in, it totally changes the outcome of your relationship. And that's how you start making those changes.
Yeah. Sorry. We haven't talked about Remy in a while, but he is being quite extra tonight.
Yeah, he did his normal get up and shake and lick his chops and all this stuff. I don't know if it got picked up on the microphones, but then he proceeded to harass you and continue to put his head in your lap. At which point I kept pushing him with my foot, and he finally got the hint, and we were just moving some laundry around in the room, and I have a couple of dress shirts that are sitting in a pile on the floor that he has now made his bed.
Yeah.
Because, like, we couldn't use the blankets that are laying half over us. Why would we lay on that? No, let's lay on the nice dress shirts, because that makes sense.
And he's just looking at us like, "What? I don't see the problem."
I saw a
Anyways.
video about free dogs do free dog stuff. And I only paid $42 for you, which was basically a paperwork fee. And I probably should have paid more. Anyways,
He's a good dog,
he
but
is.
sorry, that was totally sidetracked there.
Squirrel
I just
moment.
couldn't help but laugh at him.
So, where this ties into, right? Because we were talking about, I was like, hey, I want to shift gears on the podcast tonight, but it's going to leapfrog into what we actually were going to talk about tonight, which will be on the next podcast. And that is how important your circle is to your relationship,
Mhm.
not only on a day-to-day basis, but also when you're going through those hard times of life, because your circle is going to either help encourage connection with your partner, or they're going to create division. There is no in between.
Yeah.
And we love to live in this la la land of, oh, well, they don't really, but they don't really create disconnection. I hate to tell you, but if you think that they're in the middle ground, they're creating disconnection.
Yeah.
And you might not see it, you might not realize it at this moment, but I promise you they are.
Yeah.
Right? On that note,
Mhm.
do you have anything else about our experience?
No, I don't think so. I it I wasn't sure how we were gonna, like, talk about it, but I think it was a good representation of, like, things happen and it's okay. It's just how you choose to proceed with it, how you choose to have connection with your partner, whether you're going to choose to like come together and fight the battle together or you're fighting the battle against each other.
Mhm.
And I think more often than not, people fight the battle against each other, not realizing that you're supposed to be fighting the battle together.
Mhm.
And when you fight the battle together and realize that like you're on the same team, you want the same things, why are we fighting against each other? It really does create more connection within your relationship. But it's like this really ingrained thing, I think, from the enemy that like you're supposed to be fighting your partner.
Mhm.
And that's just what we do because we think we're supposed to. And like, oh, they're the issue. Oh, you know, even though you're probably fighting and saying the same thing, what you're hearing is different. And so, oh, I have to fight you to make my point known. And it really is like when you can shift your perspective and your mindset to we're fighting this together. Like we're trying to fight for the same cause and the same things. Let's not fight each other and figure out how to fix the current situation and the current issues. And it completely changes your communication and your connection after and everything that goes along with your relationship.
Mhm.
So it was a good one to talk about. It was not a good time to talk about it last night on the podcast, but
No.
we could talk about it today now that we've worked through it. So
Mhm.
here we are.
On that note, we'll talk about circles next time. And this week, they're going to go do the relationship audit.
Yeah. There's that.
Mhm.
Go to the Covenant Chronicles.com.
thecovenantchronicles.com. We talk about it every time. It's free. You don't got to put in any info. You go to the website, you click on, if you are on a computer, it will be at the top on the right hand side. It says relationship audit. If you are on a phone, a tablet, something like that, you got to click the little, I think it's 2 bars, the little menu icon though, and it drops down and it'll be at the bottom.
Mhm.
I just added something else. Oh, our mission. Yeah. So that now pops up on there actually as well. But that being said, you can't miss it. It's giant white letters. It's one of the biggest things there. It says
Yeah.
relationship audit on the phone and the tablet. It's right between where it says our mission and contact. It's right in the middle. You can't miss it. So that being said, go do it. You have to print it out. We did that intentionally. I have it in a digital form, and it does not have the same impact as you physically filling it out. So you need to actually go and print it out and then fill it out with your spouse.
Yeah. And if you've already done it, good for you. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, and if you've done it, then your action item for the week is at the end of the relationship audit where you came up with a strategy to attack specific things
Uh-huh.
in your relationship.
Uh-huh.
Go do those things.
Yeah. Go work on those.
Yes, yes, yes.
Make progress on your relationship.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, until next time, we shall see you, hear you. I don't know how that works.
We'll talk to you next time. That.
Okay, we'll talk to you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.